Welcome back. As you just heard, this, of course, is the London Free Press Podcast. I am your host, Lindsay Barnett. Another very busy week in the city of London, and in the month of April in particular. So I'm really excited to catch up with London Free Press reporter Jonathan Juha today. Jonathan, how you doing?
Not too bad yourself.
I'm doing very well, thank you. You wrote a great piece, but also an alarming piece on just how white hot the real estate market is in London. So we have to talk about that a little bit. We broke records again in April, did we not, for the real estate market?
Yep, yeah, it's another record in sales. More than 1,200 homes sold in just 1 month. It's sort of like the best April in record for the London and St. Thomas region kind of thing, and it's also the 8th consecutive month where we have seen sort of like real estate agents here in the region breaking those sales records kind of thing. So 2021, is shaping up to be sort of like probably the best year ever when it comes to sales, and that's happening despite the increase that we have seen in the prices, which has been going up for a few years now, but it had sort of like accelerated a little bit ever since the pandemic. In March of 2020, the average price was 447,000. And now in April 2021, we saw that reach $645,000 now. Now, obviously, that's an average. That's a number that, can be impacted by the sale of, more expensive houses kind of thing. It's not perhaps 100% what you're going to be paying for a house, but it gives you a little bit of an idea as to where things are right now. And obviously, we have seen sort of like that trend go up.
It's wild to me hearing these numbers thrown out at me and just how drastic a year difference can truly make. Is there any kind of talk of a potential crash? Like, I'm fortunate, for instance, I own the house I'm sitting in. I bought it years ago when housing prices were not this crazy and bidding wars were not as much of a thing. But I have a lot of friends who are trying to buy their first homes, break into the market. Is this even realistic anymore?
Well, trying to predict what's going to happen, it's a little bit of a dangerous game. Even at the beginning of the pandemic, if we go back, some analysts back then, they said, prices were going to go down by about 18% because of the pandemic. Obviously, the virus crisis was affecting people's jobs. And the idea was sort of like, people were not going to be in the appetite to get into huge debt right now. But then sort of like the pandemic, we saw sort of like the opposite happen. It created this situation where people are stuck at home, many doing, working from home, schooling from home. So people instead, they started looking for bigger places. And the work from home aspect of it also allowed people to not be so tied to a specific city anymore. And that's sort of like one of the main aspects of what's happening here in London. People from the GTA, they started to look further afield as to their options, and they're not so tight anymore if they can do all their work from home kind of thing. So they started like a lot of buyers coming from the GTA, and people, because interest rates are so low now, they could also sort of like afford a little bit of a bigger space kind of thing. So it has had this opposite impact to what some analysts predicted would happen at the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously, many analysts also say that, the prices that we are seeing and the growth in prices is not sustainable. It's sort of like unprecedented. It's a word that's been used a lot during the pandemic, but it also applies for the local market. And it's just not a situation in London that is specific to London. We're seeing southwestern Ontario, and the further away that you get from the GTA and some of the more expensive markets, you see price gains that have also been around, the 30% year over year kind of thing. So obviously there's some talk about there could be a correction at some point. Some people suggest that perhaps it won't be as bad as, people will lose all the gains that they have made on their properties over the last 12 months or the last few years, because it's something that the government is also very attentive to. They're paying close attention to it. And there's obviously the risk of interest rates going up, and that would increase mortgage payments and everything. But I think it's going to happen in a gradual approach, as long as the government is interested in boosting the economy post-pandemic, because that has been sort of like one of the key strategies that they have used: low interest rates to give some energy to the economy and try to recover some of the jobs that we have lost. So it's very hard to say one way or the other, but obviously analysts said, what we're seeing, these price increases, it's something that we haven't seen in the past, and it's unprecedented. It cannot continue forever. Let's say that as much they're willing to agree on that it's not sustainable to continue at this pace where you see 30% increases year over year, because at the end of the day, it's leaving a lot of people out of the market, not having even coming down with the down payment, which is sometimes some months, it's increasing the average price by 20%, things by $20,000, I mean. So it's sort of like pushing it further and further away from the reach of many people who are just trying to find a place that they can call home.
It's so interesting when you get into the economics of it, because so many Canadians, not just Ontarians, but Canadians have been laid off during this time. And you're right, the housing market, and I see the numbers just up and up and up. And again, I'm a homeowner. I feel fortunate, but at the start of the pandemic, I was flirting with the idea of potentially moving into a bigger home. The house I'm in is not big. I'm kind of outgrowing it right now. And then I thought to myself, is this even realistic? Because where do you go? It's great you're going to make bank selling, but then you're also shelling out more. So I want to talk to you about specifics in the city. Where is the cheapest, so to speak, area to buy in the city right now? And what is the average cost of a house in that area?
So if you're sort of like a little bit on a budget and you're looking for sort of like the most cost effective place where you can find, that's definitely East London. The average price in this part of the city is just above $500,000, which is still a lot of money if you ask me.
Yeah,
But
half a million. Like,
yeah,
it's a lot.
But still 250,000 less than perhaps North London, or 70,000 that in other parts of the city. So East London is sort of like your best bet if you want to stay within the London area kind of thing. It used to be that perhaps you could find something, like if you couldn't find something in the city per se, maybe you could look at some of the surrounding communities as well, in Middlesex County kind of thing. But these communities are also experiencing their own, housing booms, and prices there have also increased a lot. So sort of like the second best bet would be maybe perhaps looking at St. Thomas, where it's still a little more than 500,000, but it's sort of like some of the cheapest prices on average that you are finding here in the London region kind of thing.
Well, 25% more, right? That's the deal with St. Thomas and real estate. I do want to talk about our coworker, Calvi Leon's story that she wrote about a house in North London. And we've seen this happen a couple of times now, and it's really just jaw dropping when it does. There was a house listed that then sold for $600,000 over, and it was already listed at almost $800,000. This is in North London, a riverside property, beautiful looking property, 2-car garage, double driveway. There have been some upgrades to it, but did this just literally come down to location, 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 like we hear in real estate, because it was a river property?
Well, I think you know what, sometimes the hard ones what the hard ones, right? And I think that the buyers in this case, they just really love that property, and obviously, it offers an amazing view to the Thames River and all of that. But I still believe that this is one of those very rare cases. I mean, we're seeing obviously the multiple offers on almost all the properties that are hitting the market right now. Almost all of them are also selling with prices above the listed price. But when you go $600,000, I mean, it was listed for 800, so for 1.4 million, that's still a little bit of a very unique case. I think the current conditions of the market really are, have made it so that the list of requirements people are looking for in a house is getting, smaller. It used to be perhaps you were, very concerned, obviously, about the location, sort of like the amenities that you had in the house, maybe what was nearby, kind of thing, schools, some other considerations. But right now, I sort of feel, and talking to some of the people are in the market, that they just want to secure a place that they want to call their own, right? So this specific case is obviously, in my opinion, still a little bit of a unique case in which, I guess when you want and you have the means, you can go wild buying a property. But the reality of the market for most of the people who are trying to get into it, it's just trying to secure anything they can call their own. that fear of perhaps missing out and thinking that if I don't get into the market right now, things are just going to get away from me, and I may not ever be able to buy a house. That's why we are seeing sort of like people resorting to, asking their parents to co-sign when they're putting applications, or perhaps, parents who are selling property and using their own equity to sort of like help pay for a down payment in a house. So people are becoming, more resourceful as to trying to find a way to get into the market, because again, as much as we know that the prices have been growing in an unsustainable way, that the fear is that perhaps they'll still continue to go up. There's a chance of that, maybe at a more reasonable pace, maybe not 30%, but still you want to get into the market as soon as you want. So there's a little bit, I would say, a little bit of panic buying from some people who really feel like it's now or never.
Well, the thing about this house too, like you mentioned, it's sold for 1.4, and it's baffling to throw these numbers out like they mean nothing. Like $1.4 million is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
And one couple apparently who looked at the house and liked it didn't put an offer in, according to the article, because it needed around $300,000 in renovations. Is this something that we are seeing and hearing about market wide, or was this just kind of unique to this very unique property? Do you know?
Well, what I heard, even some of some of the properties that are selling without what are called like without conditions, without you actually going and see the property and taking a look at it. And again, it's my sense that it's sort of like this fear of missing out the possibility of entering the market. Um, and again, and that's a situation that we are seeing in many properties, that you're sort of like just trying to secure the property, and then you will deal with what comes next when the time comes. It's sort of like a sign of the way things are right now, and the desperation from some of the buyers that just want to try again. I know I've said it many times, but it's just that like many young families, first time home buyers, are having a really hard time. And again, when you see prices the way they are going, and perhaps there's an assumption that in the long run they will stabilize, but you don't know what's going to be next month. And when you see home prices jumping by 10, 20,000, then your minimum payment also goes up, kind of thing. So they're just trying to figure out a way to get in and take advantage. And sometimes that results in you buying a property that perhaps was not your ideal choice and that will require some work. But from the perspective of buyers, they're just like, you know what, I have what I wanted. I have something that I needed or felt that I needed at this moment.
As far as back to the numbers with regards to supply and demand, I know a very close girlfriend of mine is a realtor. We were chatting yesterday, actually, and we chat all the time just about the market. And she's been insanely busy because the market's been so hot. Are we seeing more houses on the market? Because it's my belief, and based on some of the numbers we were seeing last year, there was so few supply, so few houses to choose from, that's what was driving multiple offers and pushing the market sky high. Are we seeing more houses hit the market now?
Well, that's we're still at historically low levels of supply, and that's also part of the equation. The low interest rates, the high demand for housing, and the low supply are sort of like combining for this perfect storm that they're just pushing prices up. In its latest report, the London St. Thomas Realtor Association, so they mentioned that we're still there, and we have seen that decline start happening sort of like since around 2015, 2016. Some believe that the COVID-19 pandemic, it's also playing a factor right now. People perhaps not feeling comfortable with allowing people to go look at the properties, or feeling like it's not a safe moment to perhaps sell their property. That could be a factor as well. But at the same time, there are many people who are in your position who say, well, yeah, I can sell and make big money, but where do I go to? Like, it's not like you're going to find something cheaper in the market, right? So people are, trying to be having to be strategic about what they do, and perhaps unless they're being pushed, perhaps they're growing their current space, the family is growing, they definitely need an upgrade kind of thing. Many homeowners are also staying put until things stabilize, and then perhaps they're forced into the market some way or another. But definitely that's going to be sort of like a situation that is going to contribute to prices keep pushing them up. And obviously the problem with that is that the obvious solution would be to build houses, to build more. But then again, building houses doesn't happen one day from the other, right? So it's a long-term solution, but we are feeling the pinch sort of like right now.
Well, even from what I've heard, developers, some of them in the London area, it's now at like a 2-year wait list, which is just, again, it's astronomical and mind blowing when we start talking about the nitty gritty and looking at actual feasible options. I want to thank you so much for your time, Jonathan. If you listening right now want to learn more about this, Calvi's article, Jonathan's article over, of course, the pages of LF Press and over at lfpress.com. I look forward to chatting with you next time, keeping an eye on the market. It's daunting, for lack of a better word. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe. We are on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of the podcasting platforms, of course, over on YouTube and lfpress.com. We will be back next Thursday with another edition of Who Knows What, because things are crazy right now. It's crazy, unprecedented times as we all keep living in it. But until then, stay well.